Joining me now is Alan Eyre. He's a distinguished diplomatic fellow at the Middle East Institute, a career U.S. diplomat. He was also on the U.S. negotiating team in the lead up to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Alan, welcome to the program. How worried are you about this major escalation? Are we on the cusp of a much wider conflict here?
I'm very worried in terms of what we're on the cusp of. Neither I nor anyone else can predict that, but I can guess that it's going to be bad. It's going to be worse than the alternative, which would have been successful negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. So, yes, this is a very unfortunate turn of events, and events will play out very quickly over the next few days that will have serious long-term regional repercussions.
How do you think Iran, beyond what we're seeing now with them hitting Tel Aviv and buildings in Tel Aviv, how much worse do you think this is going to get? And Benjamin Netanyahu has already said this operation in Iran can go on for days.
Yes, obviously Israel has its own internal timeline, and regardless of what happens with international opinion, Israel will continue to bomb Iran until it thinks it's achieved its goals. The problem is the goal is elimination of the Iranian nuclear threat, and that's not possible because the threat resides in the minds and the know-how of Iranian scientists and other people, and that can't be eradicated. So the question is, what happens when eventually, as it must, Israel stops bombing and Iran decides to probably rebuild its nuclear program, perhaps withdraw from the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and increase military spending so this wouldn't happen again. So yeah, it's bad days ahead.
Alan, the impact of Israeli attacks, assassinations on Iran's nuclear program, on scientists, on its top military leaders, and you talked about Iran's nuclear program. How difficult would it really be to dismantle it? And after all of this is said and done, is this going to make things more difficult or easier for the Iranians? Donald Trump says Iran no longer has a nuclear program. I mean, can he say things like that?
I mean, President Trump can say whatever he wants to. As I said, though, it is, without eradicating Iran, practically impossible to eradicate the Iranian nuclear program. You can level Fordo, you can level Natanz, you can level Esfahan, you can kill a lot of nuclear scientists, you can decapitate the Iranian military leadership, but eventually, unless you have a rolling, ongoing bombing of everything in Iran that you think is threatening, Iran is going to have the chance to rebuild. And so it's I honestly don't think this solves the problem. I think in many ways it makes it far, far worse.
But do you think the Israelis, especially Benjamin Netanyahu, has other plans for Iran, possibly change of leadership from the top?
It could be. It could be. It could possibly even be that he targets the Supreme Leader Khamenei, who just addressed the nation. As I said, they've largely decapitated the current military leadership. Again, that could have pluses and minuses for Israel because all those leaders were leaders who saw action during the Iran-Iraq War. You could have a new generation taking its place that paradoxically is more reckless and more risk-prone. So it's just a roll of the dice. You're going to have new leadership in Iran. One of the other unknowns is how the Iranian public will react in terms of whether there's a significant rally around the flag phenomena that increases the Iranian government's popularity, or whether it increases Iranian popular dissatisfaction with its own leadership. It's too soon to tell.
It's hard to tell what role the Trump administration played. They say they knew about the attack, but did not have a direct role. I guess my question to you is, could Donald Trump have stopped the Israelis from launching these attacks if they wanted to and they just chose to turn a blind eye?
The short answer is yes. I have to believe that if the U.S. president put his foot down and told Israel not to go forward with the attacks, that that would happen. So my presumption is that Israel did not hear that message from President Trump. As one of your previous interlocutors said, even though there was not any preeminent threat from Iran, there was no imminent danger from Iran, as for a variety of reasons. Israel thought this was the optimal time to attack, and so it did so.
Alan, you were involved in negotiations leading up to 2015 nuclear agreement between Iran and world powers. Would we be in this situation if Donald Trump had not withdrawn from JCPOA back in 2018?
Again, it's hard to look at that particular crystal ball, but I have to think that if we had stayed in the JCPOA, events could well have turned out very differently. I mean, the JCPOA was not a perfect agreement, but it put the Iranian nuclear program back in the box. It drastically lowered the efficiency of Iranian centrifuges. It kept very low the percentage of enrichment. I mean, Iran, as you know, is now at 60% enrichment. Back then, that wouldn't have been possible under the JCPOA. So the JCPOA did, in fact, solve, at least for a time, the problem that the Obama administration was facing. Obviously, President Trump back then had good reasons, in his mind, to pull out. He thought he could put maximum pressure on Iran that would lead to a better, perhaps longer-term deal that perhaps might include other issues like proxies or missiles, but that didn't happen. And what happened instead was this dangerous escalatory spiral between Israel and Iran, between the US and Iran, that has now taken us to this point, which is, as I said, truly unfortunate, and which presages, I think, major increase of instability in the region, in the Middle East.
Alan, based on what you know, and you mentioned Iran is close to 60% enrichment, how close would that make Iran to having a nuclear weapon?
Well, again, it's almost logarithmic. Getting from 60% to 90% is relatively easy. So, I mean, the important line is once Iran learns to enrich, which happened, 20 plus years ago, that it's no longer a question of capabilities, it's a question of intention. And Iran was happy, I think, having the capability to be a nuclear threshold power, but not to go to 90%. But even once you go to weapons-grade uranium, you still have to weaponize it. And that's why experts and analysts said, even though Iran is at 60% enriched uranium, there's still a period of months, if not a year, if it chose to weaponize and build a nuclear bomb. Because it takes a lot more, as you can obviously imagine, for a nuclear weapon than just having weapons-grade uranium. And there was no indication, at least as far as I can tell, and as far as I think the U.S. government was saying, that Iran was actively seeking to weaponize. That could well change now. We'll see.
Yeah, we shall see indeed. Alan Eyre, thank you so much.